Just going to start by asking who here has heard of Clúth Housing? Could you put up your hand? Oh my God, I love doing that. Literally 5 years ago, if I asked that question, everybody would be going, it's a complete change. It's a complete shift in social housing, and we're recognised. One of the reasons we're more recognised is because we bought stuff during the crash. We bought all those unfinished estates and we mopped up all that stuff that wasn't fixed. So that's the first way people got to hear of us. And then we've got great media guys, so that was the next step. Anyway, my name is Fiona Cormican. I'm from Clúth Housing Association, who you all know who it is, so I probably won't have to explain much about it. Rebuilding Ireland, the social housing part. We've all heard of Rebuilding Ireland. The national plan made simple. We need more housing. Who here doesn't know that? We also need more social housing, and a lot of what I'm going to say to you in the next 20 minutes, Thomas Dunn has already said it from DIT. Robert Coleraine mentioned some of the issues as well. It's all the same thing. We all know this. We're just putting a different slant on it. We have to tackle the housing shortage, and we have to do it collectively. From our point of view, and Thomas Dunn may not agree, he says Part 5 raised the cost of housing and wasn't that successful. From our point of view, Part 5 was very successful. It was the first chance we got to really integrate social housing with public housing and to reduce that stigma, and it's been very successful. Back in the 60s, from the 40s to the 60s to the 70s, social housing wasn't seen as a separate entity. Somebody in everybody's family was in social housing. It wasn't that big a deal. Somehow along the line, it became a big gap between the private market and the social market, to the point when Part 5 was first introduced. I remember having conversations with big developers whose names I will not mention here, saying things like, it's going to destroy it. We'll never sell a thing on this estate. It's going to destroy our sales. It's going to be a disaster. Wasn't a disaster. Far from it. In fact, you walk into most of those estates now and you can't pick out the social housing. You've no idea. It's perfectly integrated with the rest of the housing. Now, I know there's a couple of bad examples maybe out there, but very, very few. From my point of view, I'd like to know I was living beside a social housing unit where I knew who the landlord was, where they had a website, where they had a phone number I could ring and complain, than a private investor who could be renting it to anybody, who would be doing anything in the house, and I would have no idea how to control that situation. So this is the argument we made all those years ago when Part 5 was first introduced, and we were proven right. It has worked, and from our point of view, it was the first step in integration, but we've a long way to go. I love this slide because it says it all. Without a roof over your head, it's hard to live a productive life. That didn't mean much a few years ago before the crash. It meant a lot more to a lot more people during the crash. And it's also starting to mean more to people. If anybody here is in that horrible situation or knows somebody in that situation where they were buying one house and selling their own sale went through and the house they were buying fell through, they got a taste of being homeless for a while, of relying on other people, of trying to find somewhere to rent, of being turned away because there's such a queue of people, of having nowhere to put their stuff, of moving back to their mothers and going, oh my God, the husband and the mother can't get on, so we'll move to the sisters. Oh God, they hate each other too, and so on. So a lot of people are getting a hint of homelessness over the last few years of what it's really like. It's not all about just living on the streets and having an alcoholic and addiction problem. But if you don't have a roof over your head, your life can very, very quickly degenerate into that situation. And it's not a funny place to be. It's a very unsafe place to be when you don't have a front door to call your own. We believe everybody's entitled to a decent place to live. Everybody's entitled to a front door and a roof. Doesn't matter who pays for it. Who are we? As you said, you already know us. Maybe you don't know everything about us, but in numbers, 6,500 properties across 26 counties. We've actually 16,000 tenants now. That's the size of Tullamore, I think. We have 160 staff across those 26 counties. We have a 3-year plan to deliver 2,500 units and spend €500 million in doing that over the next 3 years. So we're very ambitious. We're a big player in the property market. We're no longer the little charity organisation in the corner. We're a very big player. And we've become a big player because social housing has become a big problem. A really big problem. And the reason it's such a big problem is because there is none being built and there's none being developed. And more importantly, we're in competition with the private market at the moment, which is not someplace we should be. I'll get on to that a little bit later. But just who do we work with? We work with everybody. In fact, most of the people in this room will have heard of us or be engaged with us in some way. We have an awful lot of projects on across the country. We work with an awful lot of design teams. We work with financiers. We work with the housing agency. Construction industry, we're members of the Construction Industry Federation, and we obviously work with the state. So I think most of the people in the room would have some connection with us somewhere, or some of the other big housing providers. Just back to my point earlier about housing tenure. Everybody says, oh, Ireland doesn't do social housing well. Across Europe, there's far more social housing in all the big cities. It's not such a big deal in other countries. Actually, we're bang on line with European averages. 69% of all housing in 2016 was owner-occupied in Ireland. The EU average for home ownership is 67,000. It's the same. The EU average for social rented is 10.9. We're at 11% social housing. 11% of the stock is social housing. It's the same as the EU average. What you do have is a big variation in that EU average, where you have 96% home ownership in Romania and you've got 43% in Switzerland. Poor country, high home ownership. Rich country, low home ownership. There's something to be said. There's something about that that's important. But basically, we're the same as the rest of Europe. We've got no more social housing, or no less than the average. After the crash, we all know what happened. Housing output stopped. There was no social housing output. There was no private housing output. And as Thomas Dunn said earlier, all through every previous crash, the state had continued to build social housing. So builders were kept working, the construction industry kept moving, apprenticeships kept happening. But when the state moved away from direct provision of social housing, that stopped. We're now in a situation where an apartment block comes up for sale in Dublin City and we're all chasing the same. The local authorities chasing it, we're chasing it, developers are chasing it, we're all chasing the same land and the same units. That's not where we should be. Social housing is a key element of any housing economy, or any economy's housing issue. You will always have people who can't fully afford to pay. I love the Austrian version of how they manage this. In Austria, there's no threshold, there's no limit, where if you're at 43,000 euro here, the families at 43,000 euro, you're above the threshold, but if you're at 42,000 euro, you can get a social house. Wow, that makes a lot of difference, that €1 to your life and your ability to fund a house. In Austria, they don't have a threshold. Basically, the state decides, do you need 100% subsidy, or do you need 1% subsidy, or do you need no subsidy? That opens up a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities for cost rental model, affordable rental models, as well as social housing. It also takes away the stigma, because you have all these people on different incomes living in the same area, and you don't go around with a badge on you, I was a 1%er, or I was a 50%er. You're just in the housing complex along with private owners and so on. Wouldn't it be lovely if we could get there? My dream is that we get these mixed communities where nobody knows who's in the social housing, who's not, and it's not a big issue whether you are or not. Now we have a severe shortage. So what are we going to do? How are we going to get beyond this? The only way to do it is, there's no second-hand units. We're all chasing the same second-hand units. We have to build. We have to build more social housing, and we have to build more private housing. And we have to recognise that building social housing shouldn't be competing with the private market. It should be working alongside it. We need a 10, 20, 30-year plan for social housing, set in stone. We intend to deliver the next housing and Rebuilding Ireland does that. It sets out figures. It sets out targets. The money has to be ring-fenced. The projects have to be pre-planned. They all have to be in the plan, knowing exactly when they're coming out of the ground, exactly when they're being paid for, exactly when they're being delivered into social housing. We need a detailed plan. We need it managed by central government, and it needs to be very, very clear. Then we're not in competition with the private market anymore. We're not all chasing the same, units on every estate that's being built. We're not driving up the price of housing by competing with each other, the local authorities and the approved housing bodies. We're not competing with you for land. So for us, and I suppose my main message here today, if I have one message, is we need to start planning for the future, because we all know this boom-bust cycle continues, and if we continue, as Thomas Dunn said, doing the same thing, we're going to get the same result. What do we need from the market, which is you guys? Well, we're working, as I said, with a lot of you already. Right now, we have money, plenty of money to deliver. We have low-cost funds that we can, spend on what you deliver. Yes, at the moment we're in competition with the private market, but we'd like to have long-term plans with developers that set us aside, that you do your building for the private market and you do your building for us. And you've got a 10-year plan with us. We're going to do this site, this site, this site, this site with Clued or some one of the other social housing providers over the next 10 years. And we make commitments around that. Now, there's a bit of work to be done to be able to get us in the place to make those commitments. But as I said to somebody earlier, in the last 10 years, Clued hasn't pulled out of any project that we've made a commitment on, even if we haven't been able to put pen to paper because of procurement rules or whatever. When we're committed to a pipeline of projects, we follow it through. But also we need the state to recognise that we need to have these pipelines in place, and we need commitment of funding. We need funding ring-fenced and committed to social housing. It's not going anywhere else. This is the AHB pot. This is the local authority pot. The local authorities have to get back into direct building, and they have to be resourced to do that. And their pipeline has to, correspond with ours and complement ours, that we're not chasing the same sites and the same money and the same builders and so on. And if the construction industry knew they had a pipeline of 10 years of development, set development, guaranteed development ahead, you could afford to take on your apprentices. You needn't worry about the poaching the labour and getting as much done as you could now. There could be, programmes of apprenticeship set up, over the next few years to deliver those apprentices and those workmen we need. So, I don't know, to me it makes perfect sense, but we'll see. Most of all, what we want from the market is we want you to see social housing as a viable opportunity. Your predecessors did. They saw social housing as their safety net for when the market went up and down. We need the same thing now. We need to know that you're willing to work with us, that you don't see us as a hindrance to your sales. And it's not good enough to say, oh yeah, well, we're building on this site and we'll put you out there on the fringes in that little site that is a floodplain and whatever else. That's not the way we want social housing to be in the future. We want it to be part of your big developments. We want it to be an integral part of your pipeline of projects, an integral part of your plan. You already have to deliver on the part 5. So why not deliver more? Instead of the 10% on a scheme, give us 20%, give us 30% at full market value. We can pepper pot them around the estate. We can make them work with you on our standards and so on. We manage our estates very, very well, and anybody who's worked with you, and all the big developers have, will tell you that. And we can work with you to deliver mixed communities into the future on a long-term plan. And that's what we're aiming to do. What do we offer? We offer contracts to build. Our tenders are always up on e-tenders. We offer contracts to purchase. We'll buy your units, complete, turnkey. We also offer contracts to design and build, where we'll stage pay your development. We get a bit more control. We like those ones in particular because we have a bit more control over the quality and so on. But you should also like it because it limits your exposure to finance costs. And so look out for our tenders and e-tenders. We are bound by public procurement. But as I was saying I had a conversation with somebody earlier, small developer builders seem to be very afraid of the tender process. It's not that big a deal. We ask you, what are you building? What's the spec on it? What's it going to look like when it's finished? How much is it going to cost? And do you have the finances in place to do this, to get it to planning or whatever? Basic stuff. That's what our tender asks you for. If you can't provide a programme and you can't provide a site layout and you can't provide spec, well, really, should you be in the business? So it's not that scary what we ask for. And in return, you get a contract before you ever start on site. We stage pay it for you and take it over at the end. So that's it. Contact us if you're interested in talking to us. I don't think I went on for 20 minutes. But if anybody's any questions, you're very welcome to ask them. No? Okay. I'm sure you're all delighted I didn't go off 20 minutes this hour of the evening.